Hi, my name is Nicolette Mabubian. Today, I'll be talking about how globalization has been developing during the 19th century to the 21st century. When you hear the word globalization, what comes to your mind? Technology, the world? Well, if you think about it, without globalization in the world, people today wouldn't be able to integrate communication, prosper trade, or, as Friedman would say, make the world smaller. Globalization has numerous definitions. I believe in Friedman's meaning, which is the interweaving of markets, technology, information systems, and telecommunication systems in a way that is shrinking the world from a size medium to a size small, and enabling each of us to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before. When Friedman uses the word shrinking the world, I believe it means that because the world is gradually creating better technology, it will gradually create an environment that will create better social intercourse among people around the world. The rise of globalization started in the Industrial Revolution, which in fact promoted globalization and new technologies during the early 1800s. After that, there was the rise of nationalism, which was the time period when many countries were embracing their nationalities and rights of people from the great powers of Europe by forming their own countries, which led to the rise of Zionism. This helped to advance globalization because people started to industrialize, which helped force others to trade. Afterwards was the commence of imperialism, in which African and Indian countries were captured. Imperialism helped globalization by the merging of cultures and the beginning of creating armies to invade other countries. Subsequently was the Great War, and this war helped promote globalization by the formation of alliances among countries and new weaponry made for the armies. Soon later was the Cold War, and during this time, the United States and the Soviet Union were rivals. The Cold War helped with globalization because it pressured the countries to create better nuclear weaponry. Despite a series of events that hindered globalization, Industrial Revolution, nationalism, imperialism, the Great War, and the Cold War have really fostered globalization. Globalization all had begun in the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s and early 1800s, as Friedman would call 1.0, from large to medium. During this time period, many people started inventing many new technologies rapidly, which helped the economy and make the people's lives easier.
Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal.
These new creations had led to new jobs, like working in factories in the cities. Therefore, people who lived in the farmlands needed new transportations to go to the cities to work there, like railroads and locomotives, which helped to pull trains. Because many people had new transportations, they gained more food and money, which led to more people in the cities. Because of these new inventions, they also helped improve agriculture and or trade. For example, the spinning jenny, which was a device that spun many threads at the same time. Another example is the cotton gin, which was a machine that helped clean cotton. Modern industry required power to run its machinery. There were also many changes in the society as well. For example, less skilled labor, who worked in living conditions, more factory jobs, and urbanization and the growth of cities. The rural population has risen sharply as new sources of food became available and death rates declined due to few plagues and wars. Also, the individuals started to create new ways of communication besides writing letters to one another. For example, telegraphs, which helped people talk from long distances. Most pre-industrial life moved from being governed by monarchs to a democracy. This also helped with globalization because the Industrial Revolution was a time when individuals started to connect the dots, as Friedman would say, therefore helping with globalization. After developing the growth of cities and adapting to technology, nationalism started to rise in the 19th century, as Friedman would call 2.0, the start of medium to small. 2.0 is from 1800 to 200 AC. Nationalism means to be patriotic about one's country and to try to achieve loyalty to one's country. There were two types of nationalism, liberal and romantic ethnic. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was for liberalism, once said, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Many countries started to gain their independence based on liberal and ethnic nationalism from the Ottoman Empire and the other great powers in Europe. Because many nations were able to break away from great powers, Zionism started to emerge. Frederick Ludwig John said in 1810, "A state without a full ethnicity is nothing a fold without a state of nothing, a bodiless, airy phantom, like the gypsies and the Jews." This really questioned the Jews. Every country in Europe was able to have a national group, but the Jews were placed all around Europe without their own state or their own ethnicity. The Jews did not want to deal with the pogroms or be at fault for no reason any longer. After the Dreyfus trial, a man named Herzl became more active in wanting a Jewish state and wrote a book called The Jewish State, later created the First Zionist Congress. Many Jews started to follow his path, but many complications started to come across, like where to have their country and trying to fight against the Ottomans to have their own country. These two types of nationalism help with globalization because it merged cultures together. Therefore, it brought people closer. Another time period that fostered globalization was imperialism, which started to rise after many countries had been established in Europe. According to Webster's dictionary, imperialism is the policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. During this time period, many countries around the world, except the African colonies, came together to the Berlin Conference. During this conference, the representatives of all 14 countries, except the African representatives, came to an agreement to take over Africa because it was the easiest target. Since the African colonies had many different languages, they weren't able to fight the Europeans off their land.
Europeans had strong economies, well-organized governments, and powerful armies and navies. Meanwhile, African nations were troubled by economic weakness and political divisions.
The reason these countries wanted to take over the African countries was because of nationalistic pride, economic need, scientific racism, and their goods, which really helped with globalization. These countries had to create new weaponry and a stronger army force to be able to conquer the African and Indian countries, therefore making stronger technologies for their armies. After many countries were in more competition for land, goods, and people, the Great War happened in the early 20th century. Growing rivalries and mutual mistrusts had led to creation of several military alliances among the Great Wars. There were two different alliances, Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The Triple Alliance was formed by Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy. The Triple Entente was formed by Russia, France, and Great Britain. Although these forming of alliances led to a war, it helped with globalization because it brought countries together. It also led countries to form better military equipment because there was the rise of a dangerous European arms race, which therefore really promoted globalization. For example, the trenches and the rifles. Having a large and strong standing army made citizens feel more patriotic and also made others frightened as well. After the Great War was the Cold War, which was between 1945 and 1990. Although this war was a battle between the United States and the Soviets, this war also helped with globalization. During this time period, Harry S. Truman and later John F. Kennedy ran the United States and Joseph Stalin ran the USSR, which was the Soviet Union. Because there was a huge arms race between these two countries, nuclear weaponry were becoming stronger and stronger. Despite the fact that this war hindered globalization, it also, at the same time, advanced globalization because it pushed countries to create better technology and weapons. Countries also created satellites, which also really fostered globalization by creating even better technology. During the Cold War, there were not any physical fights among the countries, which makes this war different from any other war. Regardless of the interwar period and World War II, history has enhanced globalization gradually between the 19th century to the 21st century. Today, in the 21st century, which is 3.0, according to Friedman's notation of globalization, people around the world have really improved globalization more than ever. In the 2000s, technology has advanced exceedingly. People have been making better computers, televisions, telephones, cars, etc. These all helped with better communication and transportations. For example, the idea of Facebook helps people around the world today to keep in touch with one another. Computers also helped connect people with one another through instant messaging and emailing. These technologies have helped with globalization by bringing people closer from long distances, which therefore makes the world smaller and closer. Also, these new weaponries like nuclear weapons that have been invented in 2.0 have also helped in wars still today and have improved in 3.0. Without the start of the Industrial Revolution in the early 1800s, the world today would be very divergent.